Hi, I'm Dr. Julie Hanks, and I am so happy to be with you for this women's leadership event and to answer some questions about what I do and my work and how I can be helpful to you. So I have some questions that I'll just go through and answer for you. How did you become passionate about the messages you share on social media about combating church culture? Okay, so I don't combat church culture, I combat unhealthy messages in church culture. So just want to clarify that. I've been a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist for almost 30 years now, and I've practiced in Utah. So most of my clients have been members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And what I found is there are so many patterns of beliefs and messages that women and men came into my office with that I realized that there were some things in our culture or misinterpreted doctrine or ways that we teach things that were unhealthy. Um, So one of those would be kind of the idea of idealizing motherhood and painting a picture that's not realistic, and that motherhood is kind of the end all be all and the only thing for women in this life. And so that has created a lot of problems for my clients because if they don't absolutely love motherhood and feel fulfilled, they feel like something's wrong with them, they're not spiritual enough, those kind of things. I think the way that we have taught modesty and equated it with what girls wear is not helpful, because the definition of modesty is an attitude of decency and propriety in actions, behavior, and clothing and appearance. So it's a lot broader. So anyway, those are a couple of examples of the messages that I try to the unhealthy messages that I try to address on social media. Okay, how can we take small steps to combat church culture in our wards and stakes? I think one thing we can do is to be less judgmental of each other. The commandments and guidelines of the church are for us to judge ourselves and to measure ourselves, not to measure others. And I think there's way too much judgment that goes on in our wards and stakes. So that's a great place to start, is if you catch yourself judging someone else, what they're doing, what they're wearing, their behavior, uh, who they're dating, whatever it is, turn it on yourself and ask yourself how you're doing in that area, because guidelines and commandments are for us, not for us to judge others. How can we be better advocates for those who don't meet the norms of our church? Well, my previous answer, I think, encompasses that as well. I think we can get out of our comfort zone. We can reach out to those in the margins. We can reach out consciously to those who may not have friends or who may not fit in or who feel marginalized in some way. So every person making a conscious effort to reach out to someone who doesn't feel included makes a huge difference. How do you manage backlash from others when you openly oppose church cultural issues? So I've been a performing songwriter for many decades, and so I've been in the public eye and had some experience with criticism probably since my late teens. So being criticized is not new to me. um, but it's, it can be draining. So I do get a lot of pushback because of some of the messages that I share. I'm really careful that I don't confront core doctrine or church leaders. I have no intention of doing that. But even the cultural messages, some people get really uh, afraid, I think, is the biggest thing. So when I get negative comments or get pushback, I use it as an exercise in empathy. And I think, how must the world look from this perspective? Or what would it be like to have this much fear in my life, or be this afraid of change. And I use it to try and understand more about where they're coming from. And I recognize that those comments, the mean or negative comments, say more about the person than they do about my content. I've also learned that I am not my content, my blog post, my Instagram post. They're not me. They're authentic expressions, but they're not me. If you don't like them, that's fine. It doesn't mean you don't like me. And even if you don't like me, that's fine too, because I'm not for everybody. And that's okay. How can we be taken seriously as a woman in the church about introducing ideas that dissent against tradition? I think this is really tricky because the church is set up currently as a hierarchy with men primarily in the positions of power. So unfortunately, this requires a lot of emotional labor on the part of women, because you don't want to be too overbearing, or you don't want to dismiss priesthood authority. But I think you can make requests of church leaders. One of the requests that I make of church leaders is to say Heavenly Parents and to say Heavenly Mother, because that alone, if we can recognize and fully embrace that we have female deity, then we can see the divine in the females, the earthly females of our church. So I think asking them, making requests instead of demands, using a soft start, which is, have you ever considered, or have you thought about ways that you can include the young women in, giving them more responsibility? Or have you, right? So a soft approach, I think, will work best. How have you seen church culture impact women's mental health? Well, I see a skewed population because I've seen people who it's negatively impacted their mental health. Religion in general can be really good for mental health, creating that sense of community and having a belief in something beyond yourself. All of those things can be very, very helpful. So I see the parts that negatively impact mental health. So one big problem I've seen in my practice is perfectionism and misinterpreting the scripture, be ye therefore perfect. Perfect means teleos, which is translated as whole, ripe, or complete. So Christ is teaching us and inviting us to be whole, ripe, and complete. And that scriptural passage in Matthew is actually talking about love specifically. So how can we be whole, ripe, and complete in love? And that's through accessing the atonement of Jesus Christ in our lives. And that's what that scripture is about. It does not say, be ye therefore externally flawless with perfect children, a perfect marriage, a perfect house, perfect social media posts, perfect body. It doesn't say that. It says, be ye therefore whole, ripe, complete in love. All right, what are the best practices for self-care? I love the concept of self-care, and I like to say that women need to include themselves in their circle of care. So include yourself in your circle of care. You are not less important than other people, and don't put yourself below, and you're not above other people in your stewardship, but you're equally valuable. Best practices. I think the best practices for self-care are boundaries, setting strong boundaries. So with boundaries, what I mean is like what's okay and what's not okay for you, what you can do and what you can't do. It's okay to have limitations. And so you are the steward of your time and energy. So take responsibility for that. And if you can't do something, say no. If you can do it, say yes and do it well. But don't feel like you should say yes to everything, because you can't do everything. You are human and you have limitations. Another very important thing in self-care is physical self-care, sleep, nutrition, exercise, because your mind and your body are connected. And so when your body is doing well, your mind works better, and you have more control over and management of emotions and thoughts. How can women find their place and their role in their circumstances and have self-worth? I love that question. The most important thing you can do is to separate your performance from your worth. So we often link our performance to our worth. And then when our performance goes up, our worth goes up. And if our performance or behavior goes down, our worth goes down. So unlink performance and worth. They're separate. You're worthy and you're valuable because you exist, because you are a child of heavenly parents, not based on your obedience, not based on straight A's, not based on how you look, not based on whether or not you're married, not based on the number of children you have, or if you have children or not. Not based on whether you work or you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a working part-time mom. Your worth is never in question. So a good friend of mine, Kathy Cope, often says, everybody on the planet is worth 1 point. There is nothing you can do to be worth more than 1 point or less than 1 point. So obeying all the commandments doesn't increase your value. You might get certain blessings and you know, and have certain outcomes that you want, but your value doesn't go up. Your value doesn't go up if you have a 4.0, if you are the star of the soccer team. So unlink performance from your worth. And remember, your worth is because you exist as a child of heavenly parents. So unlink those two. What are your favorite quotes about women from our church leaders? So I have one here that is my favorite. It kind of goes along with the self-care question. It's from M. Russell Ballard, Daughters of God, from a conference talk a few years back. He said, water cannot be drawn from an empty well. And if you are not setting aside a little time for what replenishes you, you will have less and less to give others, even to your children. And I would say, if you don't have children, to your partner or your family of origin or your friends. So the importance of doing something that makes your heart sing and something that replenishes you every single day is really crucial. I often will say, we have have tos and we have get tos. So do some get tos every single day. What are some coping strategies for women with anxiety so it's not a gender issue and just seen as overly emotional? Okay, so there is a mental health disparity between men and women. At puberty, the rates of depression and anxiety go up significantly for women, but not for men. It's complex, but part of the issue, I think, is biological, just different, hormonal differences. Part of it are the expectations of the different genders. So on a practical level, research shows that women tend to do most of the unpaid care work in society and emotional and mental labor. And so since women have entered the workforce, now women tend to have, if you're employed outside of the home, you tend to have employment plus a second shift of home and family. Men have not stepped into the home front in the same way women have stepped into the workforce. And so women have this double duty. And I think that is a huge factor in mental health and stress level of women doing that second shift. I think also the unrealistic expectations on women in terms of appearance and not aging and all of that good stuff. I'm saying that sarcastically, but all of that difficult stuff makes it makes it really hard. Uh, with regard to anxiety and worry, women are socialized to feel responsible for maintaining relationships and are often taught to feel responsible for other people's emotions. We cannot control other people's emotions, and so that can create a lot of stress and anxiety if you feel responsible for the emotions of someone else when you're not actually responsible and you can't really do anything about it. How can we address negative culture that has already formed and perceived as church tradition? So, the best way to confront that is to ask questions. So, where is it in the handbook that says we have to do it this way? How come? Have you thought about doing it this way? To ask questions and make suggestions. Again, demands don't work in a hierarchy. That's not going to work. But ask suggestions. Okay, I think that's all the questions. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to tell you. Yes, there are other things. I want to tell you that you are a multidimensional human being. You are not a role. You do not exist to do one thing. Too often we say, you exist to have a family. Families are great and they're so important. And some of you won't have families on this planet. And that's okay too. All of us have multiple life missions. And as long as you are fulfilling your life's mission, that is your um, highest contribution that you can make. It's not a role as wife or mother that gives you value. You're valuable because you exist and because you have important life missions to accomplish while you're on the planet. So use personal revelation to find out what those missions are so you can fulfill them. You do not have to limit yourself. You can think big. You can require your family to support your dreams and goals in addition to supporting theirs. Include yourself in your circle of care. Your dreams and goals are just as important as other family members. So I hope this has been helpful to listen to. I'm excited to answer your questions and your comments on social media. If you want to connect more with me, I'm on social media at Dr. Julie Hanks, Dr. Julie Hanks, or drjuliehanks.com, or podcast Ask Dr. Julie Hanks. And I'd love to have any of you on my podcast. I just interview regular people who have a question for me, and it's kind of like a coaching session. So it's pretty fun. So anyway, keep up the good work. Education, yeah, yay, go education. Education has been so important in my life. Leadership opportunities have been so important in my life. And so good for you for reaching for your dreams, and keep up the good work.